Please welcome to the stage IRF in the Context of Modern Culture moderator, Executive Director, Radiant Foundation, Angela Redding, and panelists, actress and human rights advocate Marisol Nichols, and international known visual artist Hannah Rose Thomas.
Welcome, thank you for being here. Like you, I'm sure have been amazed at the incredible acts of bravery that we have witnessed and heard about today. We have the privilege of talking about culture, and that too embodies a lot of courage and bravery in living your faith in a public square. So many of the things we've heard about, from China to Nigeria, Armenia to Nicaragua, have been an incredible testament to the reality that what connects us transcends geopolitical boundaries, religious divides. We are far more connected than we are separate. And yet, you wouldn't really know that by what you see so often portrayed in culture, in media, in the spaces that we consume entertainment, where we get our news. We have recently at Radiant Foundation done a rather historic set of data research with HarrisX and found that 74% of faith-related digital content is negative, including 11% that's considered extreme, even hate speech. And everyone in the room today knows that the lived experience of faith is anything but sensationalized and stereotypical and negative. It is vibrant and beautiful and creates this moral and beautiful connection between each of us. So we have the privilege of hearing from Marisol and Hannah today, and I just want to start with a question around your passion. Marisol, let's go first. So we're talking about bravery and courage and culture and the intersection of all of those things. As an actress, in 24, in Riverdale, if anyone has a teenager, you've seen Riverdale, you know Marisol's beautiful face. Tell us what brought you to taking your craft and applying it to activism.
Sure. Well, particularly, thank you for having me for this beautiful, amazing summit. I'm very honored to be here. My mom was raised Catholic. I was raised Southern Baptist Christian. My biological father, who I met 10 years ago, is Jewish, and I've been a Scientologist for the last 25 years. So I know something about religious. About 10 years ago, I was asked to narrate this beautiful 9-minute documentary called The Story of Human Rights from my church, Scientology. And I never, human rights was always sort of just this concept that I didn't really understand or know about. And this amazing documentary, explained the history, where it started from Egyptian times, through Roman times, through present time, which someone else talked about here. It ends with the Declaration of Human Rights, written by Eleanor Roosevelt, which, if you were hearing the earlier panels, was gone over very well. And, one of the main tenets of that is freedom of religion. And I also have a nonprofit for human trafficking, and if anyone knows this issue, you know that human trafficking and slavery and religious intolerance can cross lines very, very easily. So it's a passion of mine, and I'm honored to be here. And anytime that I'm in a position where people sort of pay attention to actors and actresses and that sort of thing, and so I've always felt a responsibility to use that position wisely.
Wonderful, that's well said. Hannah, your art is a little bit different from Marisol's. Your craft is a little different. What I'm curious about is, as an artist with an incredible gift, you could have applied that skill to any kind of art. What motivated you to be so passionate about portraying women who have suffered the most incredible travesties that we can imagine? Tell us about that journey and that experience that brought you to your art today.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So I was raised in the Christian faith tradition, and I've always had a deep desire to do work, humanitarian work, to work among the poorest communities in the world. But I never really imagined that that would align with my artwork. So I've always painted. I've loved painting since I was very little. And so it all began really while I was living in Jordan as an Arabic student, and I had the opportunity to organise art workshops with Syrian refugees. And that experience was the first time I had the chance to align my artwork and humanitarian work, and that led on to me organising art workshops with Yazidi women who'd escaped ISIS captivity. And I taught these women how to paint their portraits as a way to share their stories with the rest of the world. These women had been in ISIS captivity, and many of them still had their children in the hands of ISIS. And that experience was an incredible privilege to look at the role of art in giving a voice to those who do not have a voice. And it was actually the women themselves who asked whether I would paint their portraits as a way to share their stories. So I used these icon painting methods, gold leaf that you can see in this one portrait here of one of the women that I met, as a way to show their sacred value and elevate their dignity, just so they can see it. So yeah, to use this symbolism, it's really to show their sacred value in spite of all they've suffered.
Beautiful. So, Marisol, can you give us some examples in your world in Hollywood where you think people are getting it right, where they're actually portraying faith and religion in a positive, non-stereotypical way? And
I know the audience is like, does that even exist
does it happen?
in Hollywood?
And is it getting traction?
Okay, so my industry isn't exactly known for tolerance for a lot of things, but I will say that there's a couple examples that I was like, oh wow. So most recently on Netflix, they're sort of re-showing old hits and movies and stuff, and Hacksaw Ridge came up. And I don't know if this audience has seen it. It's a phenomenal film. But it's a true life story. It was done in 2017, true life story about a soldier who was a Seventh-day Adventist. And he joined the army. This was in the time of war, but he refused to pick up a gun and he refused to kill anyone because of his faith. And I was watching this going, I can't believe this got made. I was kind of shocked. And then I was like, you can make things, but they're usually independent and no one sees them. And this was a giant studio-backed, A-list star film, highlighting this man's faith and telling this man's story, which I thought was incredible. And then you take even recently last year with Adam Sandler, who does it so well with comedy. There's a Netflix movie that he did called You Are So Not Invited to My Bat Mitzvah. I don't know if you guys have seen that. But it's sort of like, these are examples of films that are telling stories of someone's faith just amongst the story, without being overly preachy, without being stereotypical, without anything except for telling the story, and these stories are embraced. And most recently, and this is sort of what I think is changing now, so Sound of Freedom came out and hit, the roof. But it was hugely successful, but what that meant in my industry, what everyone was buzzing about, was unfortunately not so much the fact that it was on trafficking, but more that it was a faith-based film, that it was faith-based funded, and it made like 100 times its money back. That's what my business runs on, right? But that was sort of like all the execs, everyone was like, that's an interesting model, because they're just thinking with dollars and cents. That's an interesting model. We have not explored faith-based funding. And so now, I'm producing a couple projects, and literally the conversations are, can we have an element of faith to it so that we can go after faith-based funding, because it's a proven model, because it's a proven audience. And if the audience shows up, they make money.
That's right.
And it really sort of threw everything for a loop, because my industry wasn't thinking with that too much.
No, that's right. So let's talk about identity a little bit here. You mentioned faith-based funding, faith-based films, faith-based identity, right? Hannah, I know in the work that you do, it's all about bringing out that divinity and that unique divine worth of an individual Tell us more about that process that goes from meeting someone to taking the kind of artistic approach that you take to really showing what that individual work looks like.
That's a beautiful question. Well, I love representing women from communities who are all too often unseen and unheard, from the Yazidi women to Nigerian women survivors of Boko Haram, to Rohingya Muslims who fled from Myanmar, to a Uyghur woman is my most recent portrait who survived the concentration camps in Xinjiang. So using these traditional painting methods that have existed for hundreds of years as a way to elevate the dignity, to capture the story, to make sure that it's a testament for the years to come of these women's resilience, their extraordinary dignity, and also using these painting methods that are very also evocative of icons of the Virgin Mary, is also drawing that thread from the Renaissance to the modern day as well, and that thread as well of that common human experience of grief as well. So it's to enable people to relate to these stories and to connect to each individual woman that I've had the privilege of painting. But these painting methods, they're very time consuming as well. So I always find using these sacred methods, it is a form of prayer, because meeting these women, their stories are heart-rending. You come back and your heart is broken for what these women have been through and continuing to experience. So I find using gold leaf, using these methods that take a great big deal of time, is my form of prayer to these women.
What a tribute to their trial and their resilience. That's beautifully said. So I'm going to throw some data out at you.
Yeah, go.
Shall we?
Great.
So it's one thing for us to have these hypotheses and for us to think about, well, shouldn't there be more faith? And there's an example of Sound of Freedom, and there are others. But at Radiant, we'll be launching this study with Variety in a couple of weeks in February. It's all around faith and entertainment. And we've done some similar work, and it's global, almost 10,000 respondents, 13 countries in one study, 18 countries in another, 9 languages here, 5 languages there, covering all of the world's religions. Expansive. And when you do that kind of study, you never get consensus, right? Never. And yet, let me tell you one thing that blew me away, and I want to hear you respond to this. 78% of respondents said that religious stereotypes need to be addressed as much or more than gender and race stereotypes. Religious stereotypes, 8 in 10 people said media needs to address that. What do you think about that?
Right?
Isn't that amazing?
Well, yes.
So what do we do about that? We're saying that people want stereotypes to change. Religion is the most sensationalized, the most stereotyped. What do we do about that?
Well, the fact that that's coming out in Variety magazine, which is, my industry's sort of like media Bible, one of like 3. And what that does is it communicates directly to, the filmmakers and the television producers and the writers and everyone that, oh, there's an audience that wants this already. Again, we're run by money, just like that. We're run by money. If it makes money, it gets made. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Right.
And so by having that study come out, showing that this is what audiences want, and this is what people are looking for, absolutely that void is going to be filled hopefully in film and television. And I'm honored to work in that industry because I do feel like I feel like my industry is sort of used sometimes to forward certain changes in society. And it makes me very happy that that study is coming out so that my industry can be used to forward certain changes in society. I think it's vitally important, and I'm so looking forward to it.
Love it. So Hannah, tell me examples that you've seen where art, where culture, where different expressions of creativity have actually harnessed this sense of you're not the other. And let me show who you really are and who that connection is. I know in your work you talk about when you see someone for who they are, they're no longer the other. Tell us about how that shifts the stereotype paradigm.
I believe that the arts have such a power to create space for empathy and understanding and for breaking down those stereotypes and those superficial divisions between us, really. For we're all, like, at the heart of my work is the belief that we're all made in the image of God. So we're all of equal value in the eyes of God, no matter, regardless of race, or religion, or social circumstance, or economic background, or any of these things. There's very superficial divisions between us, and to remember again that sense of a common humanity. Because when you take Fahima's story, for example, if you think of her through the lens of a mother whose 4-year-old son was taken from the hands of ISIS, we can begin to comprehend a sense of just what it was for her to experience such an unimaginable ideal. But when we read in the media about ISIS sex slaves, it's very other, it's very impossible for us to understand. But so looking through that lens, through that shared experience often of grief, or of shared humanity, shared joy in those art workshops with the women. There were moments of tears, moments of laughter. Those are things that are universal for all of us. And if we can remember those things, if we can see beyond those superficial differences that create these polarities in our culture, and if we can see each other as of sacred value, as all of equal value in the eyes of God, then how differently would that be? How different a world would we live in if that's what we really believed? Yeah, that's very much at the heart of the work that I do.
What I like about that is that you said something so profound that, you hear about ISIS and you hear about the slaves that they've taken, but it is just, when the average person hears it, it's just a number. It's sort of incomprehensible to the average person, like, oh, that's terrible. But that's over there, it has nothing to do with me.
Right.
So by shining a light on a particular story or a particular person and making them human, all of a sudden any woman is going to see that and go, oh, that could have been me, or any husband or father, that could have been my kid. And so I always feel that highlighting particular people or telling a particular story when you're speaking about whether it's religious intolerance or slavery or whatever, that's what always communicates to the audience and allows people to feel something back.
That's right.
True.